You talk too much. You react too fast. You justify everything, explain everything, constantly defend yourself, and you don't even realize how much this is draining you. Maybe no one has told you this yet, but real growth begins in silence. Not the silence around you, but the one within, the kind you were never taught to cultivate. And that's exactly what no one talks about. You've become so used to reacting, arguing, and proving your point that you've forgotten how to listen to yourself. But what if I told you that what you're missing isn't more strength, but less noise? That the great Stoics ruled not by raising their voices, but by knowing when to stay quiet? That this silence is a discipline capable of transforming everything? In this video, you'll discover how silence can become your greatest power. Not a passive silence, but a strategic, intentional, powerful one. With each topic, you'll understand why silence is an act of mastery, focus, and wisdom. Stay with me until the end, because once you learn to use silence the way the Stoics did, your life will never be the same. Silence is not just the absence of speech. In Stoicism, it's the first barrier between impulse and wisdom. Before any reaction or decision, there's a silent choice, and that's where self-mastery begins. While many see silence as passivity, Stoics saw it as active inner power. To master silence is, in practice, to master yourself. How many times have you reacted impulsively and regretted it later? Silence is the time you give yourself not to become a slave to the heat of the moment. When you choose silence, you're saying, "I'm not ruled by my emotions, I am in control." That space between stimulus and response is where freedom begins, and that freedom is what separates the wise from the reactive. Epictetus taught that we shouldn't worry about what we can't control, and often our first emotional spark is uncontrollable. But what we can control is our reaction, and silence is the most effective way to respond without losing composure. It slows the emotional storm and brings you back to your center. Practicing silence is like strengthening an invisible muscle, awareness. Imagine someone provoking you. The automatic response would be to snap back or justify yourself, but silence, in this case, becomes a mirror. It reflects the other person's energy back to them, without you absorbing it. Even more, silence forces others to hear themselves. It reveals who is at peace and who is at war. That's why remaining silent is more than a tactic. It's maturity. This discipline takes practice. At first, you'll want to defend, explain, and win arguments. But with time, you'll realize that silence is more powerful than any comeback. It's the language of serenity. And the more you train, the more you understand that speaking less is a sign that you no longer need to prove anything. It's wisdom embodied in action. True personal transformation doesn't start with big declarations. It starts with small restraints. And silence is one of them. It's the act of breaking the reactivity cycle that traps so many. When you stay silent, it's not weakness and it's strategy. That's where true self-mastery is born. When you realize you don't need to win the argument, you just need to win yourself. The urge to speak quickly, to say what's on your mind without pause, is what leads many into unnecessary conflict. Stoic philosophy teaches that before any reaction, there must be observation. It's not about being passive. It's about being emotionally strategic. Speaking less isn't fear, it's wisdom. Those who observe more suffer less. When you stay quiet, you gain time to assess instead of being consumed by the moment. The Stoic doesn't walk into storms. He studies the wind before speaking. And in that silent pause, he notices what others are too distracted to see. Observation is listening with the eyes. It's seeing the intention beneath the words. Most people speak to release emotion, not to resolve. And when you answer without observing, you become just another voice in the noise. But when you speak after observing, your voice carries weight. Marcus Aurelius said that others' opinions don't define you, but that only works if you train silent observation. That pause lets you see things with clarity. This discipline is especially useful in conflict. When someone is heated, answering in the same tone only fuels escalation. But if you observe and stay silent, you break the cycle. The other person is left facing their own reflection. And often, your silence is what brings the truth to the surface. Because silence reveals what emotional noise conceals. Practicing this in everyday life transforms meetings, family discussions, even relationships. You become someone who speaks little, but precisely. Someone who listens not just to words, but to what's hidden between the lines. That builds respect, because those who don't rush to speak show mental discipline, and that inspires quiet authority. To speak less is to trust that observation is more valuable than reaction. It means knowing that not everything needs an immediate answer, and often not answering at all is the most powerful response. That's how the Stoic protects his energy and makes better decisions. He doesn't react out of habit, he acts from wisdom. And it all begins with a simple choice: speak less, observe more. We live surrounded by noise, voices, notifications, opinions, demands. Everything is screaming around us all the time. And in the middle of this constant noise, it's easy to forget how to listen to the only voice that truly matters: your own. Stoic philosophy invites us to create moments of silence, not just externally but internally. Because without silence, there's no reflection. And without reflection, there's no growth. The mind needs pauses to process, understand, and recalibrate. When you're caught in the noise, you simply react to what happens. But when you withdraw, even briefly, you start accessing wisdom from within. That inner silence reconnects you with your values, your limits, your direction. And it's in this quiet space that your true voice returns. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his journal to converse with himself. That simple act is one of the most powerful ways to silence the outer world. Writing becomes a mirror for your thoughts. It lets you recognize patterns, clarify emotions, and see what's stealing your energy. Silence reveals truths that noise keeps buried. That's why reflection needs space, and space needs quiet. Silencing the world doesn't mean abandoning it. It means building conscious boundaries, saying no to pointless conversations, to endless scrolling, to distractions pulling you away from your path. The Stoic isn't against the world. He just refuses to let the world dictate his rhythm. Silence becomes the invisible line that separates your peace from the chaos around you. This kind of pause is also a form of healing. When you go quiet, your body breathes deeper, your mind clears, your heart slows down. You begin to notice what was invisible. Signals from your body, answers you've carried all along, buried beneath noise. Silence isn't absence, it's presence. It's you, fully with yourself, uninvaded by external voices. Making silence a habit is like taking a shower for the soul, a moment that's just yours. Even 10 minutes a day can change everything. For it's in that sacred pause that you think clearly, feel deeply, and choose wisely. Silencing the world is an act of courage, because when everything is quiet, the truth finally has room to speak. One of life's greatest emotional challenges is dealing with a wounded ego. When we're criticized, ignored, or rejected, our first instinct is to defend ourselves. It's natural to want to respond, explain, or retaliate. But that's exactly when Stoic silence becomes powerful. Instead of acting impulsively, the wise stay silent and transform pain into strength. The ego wants to be right, to be validated, to feel important. But silence disarms that need. It teaches us that we don't have to answer everything to protect our dignity. Sometimes simply not reacting is already a victory over ourselves. Silence isn't weakness, it's control. It's the response of someone who is no longer a prisoner of their pride. When the ego is hurt, impulse takes over. But silence allows you to observe your pain without being ruled by it. It's like applying ice to an emotional wound before deciding what to do. And by doing so, you avoid decisions you'll later regret. You don't deny your feelings, you just don't let them lead. That's emotional maturity in action. How many times have you regretted speaking in the heat of the moment? Words said under the ego's grip rarely build, they usually wound. But silence gives time for clarity to return. It creates space for emotion to settle and reason to rise. That's how the Stoics faced insults and humiliation without losing their dignity, through calm, deliberate silence. Silence is a shield against self-sabotage. It protects your peace when everything in you wants to scream. Instead of engaging in pointless battles, you choose to walk away, not in bitterness, but in strength. It doesn't mean repressing or avoiding. It means waiting for the right time and the right tone. Silence is a strategic pause, not a final word. Over time, you'll realize you don't have to prove anything to anyone. Who you are will speak louder than any argument. Silence heals the ego because it ends the cycle of reactivity. It shows you no longer rely on external validation to feel whole. And that's one of the clearest signs of inner growth, choosing silence, even when the world demands a shout. Not every difficult relationship needs more words. Sometimes it needs fewer. Fewer explanations, fewer justifications, fewer efforts to be understood by someone who's not even listening. In moments like these, silence becomes emotional protection. It doesn't close doors. It just stops you from knocking on the ones that were never opened to begin with. When a conversation turns into a battlefield, silence is the wise person's ceasefire. Not from weakness, but from clarity. It's when you realize that speaking more doesn't mean being understood, and that trying to be heard by someone who only listens to their own ego is a draining cycle. The Stoic knows silence can be an act of self-respect. Sometimes, silence is the clearest way to show that you've already understood everything, that you no longer need proof, promises, or explanations, that your peace is worth more than being right, and that you'd rather preserve your energy for what actually matters. In that sense, silence is self-love, and also love for the other, by not fueling the fire anymore. In difficult relationships, silence isn't indifference. It's emotional maturity. It's knowing not everything needs to be solved right now, not every misunderstanding requires a reply, not every injustice deserves an instant answer. Sometimes time needs space to do its work, and silence gives room for emotions to settle and truth to emerge. That doesn't mean staying silent forever. It means staying silent for now, so that when words are finally spoken, they come from reason, not anger. So they build instead of wound. Silence is a pause that heals, rebuilds, and reveals. And often, after that silence, you'll realize the conversation didn't need to happen, because you've already moved on. In difficult relationships, silence also teaches boundaries. It shows that you can love and still choose what not to accept, that you can forgive without surrendering, that you can stay close without losing yourself. Above all, it teaches you that your peace is your responsibility, and silence is one of the noblest ways to protect it. We live in a time where noise isn't just sound, it's behavior. Every notification, every mindless scroll, every shallow conversation is a distraction disguised as urgency. Stoic philosophy warns us about this. Anything that takes your attention without return is stealing your life without permission. That's why silence is so powerful. It clears the path for focus. Silence isn't just about quieting your mouth, it's about quieting your automatic habits. When you choose silence, you start to see where your energy is leaking. You notice how often you speak out of habit, react on impulse, consume out of boredom. Silence becomes a lens. It helps you separate what truly matters from what's just noise filling the void. Marcus Aurelius reminded us that life is too short to waste on trivialities. Every moment spent arguing online, reacting to gossip, or giving opinions you don't need to give is a moment lost. Silence is the gateway to focus. It pulls you out of the chaos and brings you back to your priorities, your goals, your clarity, your essence. Training silence in this context is also training discipline. It means observing before acting. It means no longer jumping into every debate, absorbing every opinion, or commenting on everything. That's not ignorance, that's selective wisdom. It's using silence to filter what deserves your energy and what doesn't. You simply let it go. You start to realize that less truly is more. The mind needs space to create, plan, and decide, and that space only comes when you quiet the excess. Silence becomes an ally of productivity, mental health, and strategy. Those who silence distractions sharpen focus, and those who focus achieve, while others waste time reacting to everything. Cutting distractions isn't isolation, it's reconnection. It's saying no to external noise so you can say yes to your own growth. It's realizing that time is your most precious resource, and silence, when used with intention, becomes a vault that protects that time wisely. A Stoic focuses, and silence is the shield of that focus. In an age of exposure, it feels like everything must be seen. Every step, every win, every change must become a post, an update, a public statement. But real growth happens in silence. Like roots deepening before a tree rises, personal evolution needs stillness, solitude, and quiet to gain depth and truth. The Stoic doesn't seek recognition. He seeks consistency. He knows that growth is a lonely, invisible process. It's falling asleep with doubts and waking up with decisions. It's resisting temptations, breaking habits, rebuilding beliefs, all without applause. Silence is the space where real transformation takes shape. Seneca said the wise man lives in harmony with himself. That harmony can't be found in likes, compliments, or applause. It's built in the background. When you choose not to repeat patterns, when you break a cycle, when you say no to what once controlled you. That's the kind of work that can't be seen, but completely changes who you are. And it's precisely because it's invisible that silent growth is so valuable. It doesn't depend on approval. It doesn't seek an audience. It's driven by purpose, not attention. And that's the kind of growth no one can take from you, because it wasn't built for them. It was built by and for you, decision by decision. Silence protects that process. It keeps doubt from contaminating your belief. It prevents insecure opinions from draining your courage. And more than that, it teaches you to trust timing. Because what grows in silence blooms with strength. The world wants quick results. Silence wants deep roots. And rooted people don't fall to every storm. So don't worry about showing your progress. Live it, nurture it, quietly. Because when the time comes, your results will speak louder than any words, and no one will be able to deny what you built in the dark. Growing in silence is the art of preparing to shine without needing a spotlight. And that the Stoics understood better than anyone. There are people who, when they walk into a room, command respect without saying a single word. Their posture radiates strength, calm, and quiet confidence. This is the presence of someone who has nothing to prove because they've already conquered themselves. The Stoics called it inner authority, and it begins in silence, in self-control, in the still power of identity. Speaking less isn't just about behavior, it's a spiritual language. It shows a mind that no longer needs to convince, compete, or be seen. At this level, silence becomes a message. I am at peace with myself. And when you carry that peace, people feel it, and they respect it, because silence reveals what words often try to hide. Epictetus taught that no one is free who is not master of himself, and silence is evidence of that mastery. Those who know themselves listen to themselves, and those who listen understand, and those who understand no longer need to shout to be noticed. Presence without noise is the fruit of an identity built from within. Instead of talking about your values, you live them. Instead of defending your worth, you embody it. Silence becomes your shield against shallow criticism and hollow praise. It protects you from pride and the need for validation. When you live this way, you discover a new kind of freedom, the kind that doesn't need an audience to feel real. This quiet presence has transformative power. It inspires, it disarms, it heals. Because in a world full of shouting and masks, those who stand firm in silence become a lighthouse. You don't push, you invite. You don't challenge, you inspire. And the most powerful part, you change environments without saying a word. In the end, silence isn't just a choice, it's a level, a state of maturity, a way of being that says, I don't need to explain who I am. The Stoic doesn't speak loudly. He lives deeply, even in silence. And that's the kind of presence no one can ignore. Now that you've made it this far, pause for a moment and listen to the silence around you. Feel that space. That's where your transformation begins, not with loud promises or dramatic speeches, but with the conscious choice to shut your mouth and finally hear your soul. Silence is where wisdom whispers, and the Stoics knew this better than anyone. You no longer need to explain yourself to prove who you are. You don't need to shout to be respected. True respect begins the moment you master yourself, and that mastery always begins in silence. Your greatest strength may be hidden in the one thing you haven't yet learned to control: your words. Train silence, practice focus, observe before reacting. Because those who stay silent with purpose grow stronger than anyone expects. If this message spoke to something inside you, Don't let it die in silence. Share it with someone who needs to stop yelling and start listening. Leave your like, your comment, and subscribe to this channel for more content on inner strength and Stoic wisdom. Now go, quietly, and begin the kind of transformation no one needs to see, but you'll feel it every day.